Opioid use leads to abuse, heroin, and fentanyl for too many Michiganders. This morning, the latest in the fight against opioid addiction. Plus, the races in next year's election are already heating up. Today is Sunday, October 15th, 2017. This is Flashpoint. Hello and welcome to Flashpoint. I'm Kimberly Gill. Devin is off this week. Thank you so much for being with us. We've been talking about the issue a lot lately. Heroin is killing more people than AIDS, guns, and car crashes. More than 33,000 Americans died of an opioid overdose in 2015, and those numbers continue to climb. The numbers are also rising when it comes to the number of lost jobs, broken marriages, and children sent to foster care by this crisis. It is a big deal. Here at Local 4, we are committed to addressing the opioid crisis in our communities. On today's show, we'll have a discussion about this growing epidemic. Then we'll talk a little politics. It's still early, but next year's election is already heating up. In the race for governor, we've seen early polls show a deadlock in a potential head-to-head matchup between Republican Attorney General Bill Schuette and Democrat and former Michigan Senate Minority Leader Gretchen Whitmer. And the number of candidates vying to succeed Representative Dave Trott in the 11th district seems to grow week by week. We'll talk about that race and some others too. It's all this morning on Flashpoint. But we're going to start this morning with the opioid epidemic, and I have a roundtable of experts with me with different perspectives on the problem. Darlene Owens is the Director of Substance Use Disorders Initiatives at the Detroit Wayne Mental Health Authority. David Clayton, next to her, is Youth Coordinator at Families Against Narcotics and in long-term recovery himself. We also have Dr. David Kim. He's a pain medicine specialist at Henry Ford Hospital, and James Berlin is Chief of Police in Roseville. Thank you guys so much for being with us and talking to our viewers this morning. So David, let's start with you. Just tell us a little bit about how your addiction started.
Yes, my addiction started at a relatively young age. Experimental stages with alcohol and marijuana around the ages of 12 and 13. And then my story is nothing unique as compared to anybody else who goes down the road of opiate abuse. You know, it started harmlessly taking a Vicodin, so I thought, and then
was that Vicodin prescribed for you?
No, something? It was through a friend that I was hanging out with that we were constantly, you know, smoking pot with and drinking with, and then it ended up turning into he's saying, I don't have this, but I have this. And then he handed me this Vicodin, and I took it, and I remember I liked it. And then the first thing I said was, I can imagine what 2 would do, and then the 2 turned into 3. And then going on from that, it sent into a nasty Vicodin addiction. And then the Vicodin turned into Oxycontin, and then the Oxycontin turned into Dilaudid, and then it was, you know, as it starts progressing, and then it turned into a pretty nasty heroin addiction. Which
is what happens to quite a few people. They have your exact same story or similar story.
Yeah.
So, Darlene, I know in your organization you work to reverse overdoses and people that are very much like David, and you've actually brought some things with you. Talk about what this is and what these things do.
This is our naloxone or Narcan kit. So what we've been doing, we launched our program in March of 2016, in which we actually went out and started training police officers on how to reverse overdoses. So it was all first responders. Our second phase is that we launched it with our prevention and treatment providers, and then the third phase with the community. So any organization that wants to have one of these kits with them in their homes, in their cars, all they have to do is give us a call. We'll come out, train them, and we'll give them a kit free of charge. We're public safety. It's our responsibility to take care of any of our residents that are in trouble. So basically with this kit, you can reverse an overdose. We have a log that they fill out every month. We get that to see what's going on. Was it successful? If it wasn't, and we replace the kit with another kit. So we're going to make sure we arm our folks with that.
It is so important to lock your drugs up, opioids, whatever you might have. And this next thing is something that can help people that don't need the drugs anymore, need to get rid of them.
Exactly. These are deterrent bags. These are eco-friendly. It deactivates the medication, and it's an easier way to dissolve it. So all you have to do is put water with it. You could take liquids, patches, pills. This is a large bag. We have small bags. This is free, of course, to the community as well. Anytime we go out and do fairs, we always have this there. This is good for our senior citizens. If they can't get out and they have a bunch of pills laying around and you don't want your grandchildren to get into them or someone else, we like to give these out to everyone, so it's eco-friendly. You can throw it in your kitchen trash. You don't have to worry about.
And it deactivates the drug somehow.
Yes, it does. It deactivates the drug. The stuff that's inside of it, it basically deactivates it. It dissolves it, and you can go on.
Okay, I'll turn the conversation over to Chief. How has the epidemic changed the way you guys police? Are you seeing more crime? Are you responding to more instances of overdoses in homes and in terms of your department in Roseville?
Yes, we're not immune to the amount of overdoses. They're happening every day, everywhere, and we do respond to those. But crime itself is up as a result of the opioid crisis. They need to get the money to buy their drugs somehow.
Sure.
So people are breaking into cars, breaking into homes, businesses.
Are they breaking in to get the pills? As David was saying, you know, he found a Vicodin and he had a friend, so they had to get that from somebody. It was prescribed to somebody. Sometimes,
you know, they might raid the medicine chest to see what's there, but mostly it's to grab whatever they can readily turn into cash or trade for drugs to fuel their habit. So it affects, you know, even if you're not addicted to opioids, it's affecting everyone, either directly or indirectly.
Dr. Kim, what responsibility would you say that doctors have in terms of prescribing these opioids?
Well, part of the problem we as doctors have is that we're kind of stuck in the middle. We have patients who need pain relief. We have heavy regulatory pressure with the new CDC guidelines limiting opioids, which is the right thing to do, frankly. So I think we as physicians have to really educate ourselves in the proper management and prescription of these medications. And these are out there on every website, like the Center for Disease Control. In fact, I encourage every patient to even look at it, that looks at the pros and cons of using chronic opioids for chronic pain. Also, you know, the state itself requires CME for physicians to educate themselves, because you can understand that as, you know, I'm old enough to remember in med school that, you know, we weren't really taught about opioids. You know, the last opioid we used was because some other older doctor was using it for 30 years and he never got trained either. So there is no formal training in the use of these things in the regulatory environment and how to prescribe it safely. Now we have that information out there that I think every physician needs to educate themselves. And I think medical schools, which are, I think that the tide is changing. Medical schools now are incorporating more and more of opioid-based training. In fact, I read one, I think it was out in Massachusetts at Harvard, where they were actually incorporating that as part of the core curriculum. It is not happening everywhere. That's the problem. So, like for instance, in my pain center at Henry Ford Pain Clinic, you know, I may get a medical student occasionally. I think, frankly, I should have 30 medical students, and they should go with me, and I can actually put them through it's not that hard. You can go through a cookbook way of prescribing safely, figuring out who is a good candidate for opioids and who's not. Now, I would say the majority of patients with chronic pain do not need opioids. They do not. But there is a small minority that nothing else helps, and they're suffering, and they will need these medications.
What do you say is the synthetic opioids that are really putting the crisis into overdrive, like the fentanyl and the carfentanil, or is it mostly the opioids?
I'll tell you what. What's killing people, frankly, are the synthetic ones, because they are so dangerous, so potent, right? But what's really lighting the majority of the fire started with the doctor's prescription pad. That's the problem. So I think we as physicians have to take a step back and really think about and have an honest conversation with the patient about the risk and benefits of giving a prescription, even for a sprained ankle. And if you're going to give it for an acute injury, give it for a short period of time.
David, what do you think about the synthetic opioids? Is that something that has sent this into overdrive, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, you know, I remember back in 2007, 2008, and there was this fentanyl-laced heroin we kept hearing that was on the street. And there was this influx of overdoses that was happening, and that was around the time that Families Against Narcotics was founded. And then now, that's all you're hearing is fentanyl-laced heroin, carfentanil-laced heroin. And it's just, and the problem with heroin addicts is that people that are actively using heroin and active addiction are going to the house, to the drug house of where people are overdosing from. If I found out someone that was overdosing, that's the heroin that I want because I know it's going to be good. And I'm going to use every justification and rationalization that says that it's not going to happen to me. And with this heroin being cut was so powerful, these naloxone kits aren't working. You know, they're administering, you know, 2, 3, 4 doses of Narcan, and it's just not working anymore. And that's the problem with it. And we, as FAN, go and educate, and we have gone to Michigan State and talked to their medicine students. And so we're letting them know what is actually happening, sharing, you know, my story, other speakers' story with them, and letting them know what's happening. And then we hold Narcan trainings before our monthly forum meetings that the average citizen can have Narcan available to them. And that's if a family member has a son or a daughter or a loved one that is maybe using or used in the past and now is in recovery. But, you know, as things happen, overdose, people can relapse, and that's when they can go back out, and that's when those kits are paramount.
Yeah. Darlene, you're in the business of educating as well.
Exactly. So what we have is we have approximately 35 prevention providers in Wayne County. About 15 coalitions. So they go out and they do education in schools. They do it in school assemblies. We have women's specialty programs in which we concentrate on talking about prescriptions and heroin and overdose. Basically, we have a program in which they actually go and knock on college dorm rooms and knock on there and start educating them and talking to them about the drugs and what have you and stuff. So the thing is, those are our boots on the ground. They're the ones that's out there in the community, seeing the folks wherever they're at. If they're in the church or what have you, they go out there, educate, be a part of their fairs, establish fairs, have town hall meetings. We do this on a regular basis, so we're working constantly Saturdays and Sundays, late nights, because we know this is so important that we have to get the word out. We have to educate. So that's something that we do, and we have all kinds of brochures on everything that you need. If that parent has that difficult conversation talking with their youth, we got something for you. We have programs that actually can come out and talk to parents or kids. So we have outreach programs.
Is there anything else that needs to be done, or what needs to be done? Is the U.S. government, is there anything that they can do to take steps against this opioid epidemic? And if so, what is that? Dr. Kim, you have any?
Well, actually, they've already started. Okay, there's been a sea change in the prescription. There were no guidelines before. But frankly, every little doctor did his own thing. Now there are guidelines for the Center for Disease Control telling you about the dosage limits, what is considered a semi-safe dosing. Their preamble, their context is that you shouldn't use opioids for chronic pain in general. But if you're going to use it, here are the steps that you have to do to safely prescribe. So now I think the government has gotten involved, but in essence, the government created its own mess because they're the ones that many years ago mandated aggressive treatment of pain.
Sure. Chief, I'll let you have the last word. What do you think?
Well, I think it's a cultural shift. We are a feel-good society, and no matter what problem we have in life, we want to turn to some type of pill or whatever to fix it.
We can't tolerate pain very well.
We need to teach ways to overcome adversity and minor pains, and that other than turning to a drug or alcohol or whatever. So we need a whole cultural shift to deal with our adversity in life. We have it. It's there.
It's a conversation that we can continue to talk and talk and talk about. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Guys, we thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having
with our viewers. All right, stay with us. We'll talk politics when we come back. Welcome back. Yes, there is an election on November 7th, and we'll talk more about it in the coming weeks. But right now, we're going to leapfrog to the 2018 election, where the races for governor, Senate, Attorney General, and 11th Congressional District are all heating up 1 year out. Joining me to talk about it is Sheila Cockrell, former Detroit City Council member and president of Crossroads Consulting. Next to her is columnist for the Detroit Free Press, Nancy Kaffer. Nolan Finley is editorial page direct editor for the Detroit News, and Dennis Darnoy is founder of Densar Consulting. Thank you so much for being with us, guys. Yeah, so we'll jump right in. Let's start with the race for governor. There was an article in the paper last week about endorsements, and we know Bill Schuette got a big endorsement from President Trump, and some other endorsements have come in from some key Wayne County public officials for the Democratic side. Sheila, I'll start with you. What does it matter? What do endorsements even mean this far out, especially?
Well, I think they help set the stage for fundraising for various candidates. It helps clear the field for other challengers who may be trying to get attention inside the different party apparatus. But I don't think it seals anybody's fate as a victor. But it's part of the process.
So, I mean, Dennis, you have a year out, we've got a year to go, and certainly Donald Trump, that's a big name versus some of the other local elected officials who have given endorsement. Does that make a difference?
It does. I mean, especially for Bill Schuette, it helps close off avenues for other competitors. The president's the biggest name in the Republican Party. He has, the former governor, he has Candace Miller's endorsement. So it's hard to see where a challenger is going to get an endorsement of equal weight or size.
Yeah. Does anybody care, Nolan?
Well, yeah, I think there are two types of endorsements. There are celebrity endorsements, if you will, politicians and what have you, and then there are endorsements that come with money and volunteers. For example, when the UAW weighs in, they weigh in with foot soldiers and with money, with cash. I think I agree with Dennis. In the Republican Party, Donald Trump's endorsement will matter in the primary. It's hard to see how anyone can win that primary who doesn't necessarily need to have his endorsement, but he can't be against him, or you can't be against him. I think that's one of the reasons Brian Kelly, who is not a Trump supporter, is weighing his decision so carefully, as well as Senator Fred Upton, or Representative Fred Upton, who was considering a Senate bid. He was also anti-Trump in the campaign, and that is not an administration that forgets its enemies, and I think that's weighing into his mind as well.
Does it turn into votes, Nancy, would you say? Endorsements.
In the Alabama Senate race that just kind of wrapped up the primary, Luther Strange, who had Trump's early and strong endorsement, lost to Roy Moore. So the other thing is that the president's approval rating is in the 30s now. So this is, in a primary, there's a small group of motivated voters who can come out and really move the needle. Yeah. But in a general election, you're talking about a president right now with a very low approval rating, and how many people are taking his word for what the right thing to do is.
And that's the dilemma Republicans face, because they're going to need to show some fealty to Trump to get through the primary, particularly in Michigan. I think Alabama was an outlier because the Trump supporters were with Roy Moore, and the president said afterwards, you led me astray here with this and this support of Strange. But yeah, I think when you get into the general election, Republicans who have ran too closely to Donald Trump are going to have to figure out how they shift their message, or if they even can.
Right. As far as the number of people that have thrown their hat into the race here, there are more than half dozen on each side. Is that something that's unprecedented? Have we seen that before?
Yeah, we've seen that before, especially in 2010 when Snyder ran. It was an incredibly packed primary with a lot of named people. The difference this time is you probably don't know more of the candidates than that you do know.
There's so many names that you don't know.
Yeah.
Correct. And with that, do you think that the Donald Trump effect has had any effect on the people that decide to run? Like, is it kind of like, oh, Donald Trump ran, so I don't have very much political experience, I'm going to throw my name in the hat too, I might win?
Yeah, there's certain people who look at it. I mean, you can look at the Kid Rock candidacy and say there are people who would think that he would appeal to a Donald Trump-like crowd. So yeah, there definitely is an effect.
Can we say Kid Rock candidacy?
Absolutely. Feel free.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a Donald Trump effect here?
I think that there are certainly in any election people who are completely unqualified who run and to think that they can seek office. The only difference is now we're seeing them win, which is a little problematic. Right. But yeah, no, I mean, you always get that kind of people. Sometimes people just want to see their name on the ballot. Yeah. Sometimes people really think they can do the job.
Sheila?
Yeah, I think if you look at the name, like of the roster of people who are running in the 11th district and in general, it's basically people who have been part of the political process and are kind of coming back and around to make another effort.
Term limits have created a lot of potential candidates for every office in Michigan. If you look at that 11th district rate, almost every one of them has served in the legislature and have either been term limited out or are fixing to be after the end of next year.
Yeah, Ruth Johnson, Secretary of State, can't run again because of term limits.
No, but I think she might run for the legislature.
She's running for the state senate.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so in that case, how do you think that's going to shake out?
Well, I mean, I think she's scaring away a lot of competition, especially on the Republican side. The ability to have already raised funds, have fun in a campaign account, which you're able to transfer over. So, yeah, I mean, term limits definitely creates moving chairs. If you do look at the 11th, a lot of people are waiting to see what Laura Cox might do. Because if she chooses to run for Congress, now someone's going to run for the Senate seat, which might open up a House seat. Right. So, yeah, there's a lot of
And the whole Lena Epstein thing, where she was running for one and then decided she's going to change to the 11th district. Your thoughts?
I mean, it's not good for anybody with a big name when there's too many big names in the race. You just split your vote and your chances of getting what you need to move on to the general. I mean, yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of waiting and seeing, careful positioning of where people's best chances are.
Sheila?
Yeah, well, Kurt Heise got in today. He's got a really strong base in Plymouth, the Plymouth Township area. So to Nancy's point, you're going to like split the people who know the names.
And the geography of this district it makes a difference too. It's partly Oakland County, partly Western Wayne. Now you've got Heise and Laura Cox in from Western Wayne. You've got Johnson, maybe Kowal, some others who are in from Oakland, and you know it'll depend how the voter turnout goes in each of those counties.
We mentioned Kid Rock earlier. How serious is he?
Not at all.
Who wants to handle that one? Yeah.
Not even a little.
About anything.
No.
You don't.
Well, there's a lot of talk on Twitter about him and the possibility of Eminem running. You maybe heard earlier this week Eminem dropped this video where he's talking about anti-Trump this and that, and people are trying to get him to run. What do you think about that?
I think they should stay in their lanes.
Exactly. And it does speak a little bit to the disregard people have for the political process. If you've got folks actually rallying toward Kid Rock and Eminem, I mean, it's this whole political process has become a big top circus, and I don't think the people are taking it very seriously.
What would the responsible thing for someone who has the influence and power of a Kid Rock or an Eminem to do would be to talk to people who they can reach that maybe aren't in touch with traditional campaigns and politicians about traditional politics, why it's important to vote. Politicians, they have the luxury and the resources to understand and support. That would be the responsible, patriotic, civic-minded, right thing for someone with that kind of influence to do.
And they could have some impact on the
They
system.
could real impact, and they
probably more
really,
so from outside the system than once they join those dysfunctional
they speak to a whole crowd of people who never read Your Page or Mine, who never listen to this show, who aren't
voting, right?
Yeah, and that's what they should be doing.
Yeah. They wouldn't elevate the discourse to Lincoln Douglas debate like so. Maybe a wrap off at Fox, so would be fine, but not politics. No.
Great. Okay, guys, we are out of time. We thank you for coming. I'm sure we'll be discussing this as the election comes up in 2018. We'll be back to wrap things up in just a moment. Stay with us. And before we go this morning, we want to remind you that the only mayoral debate will be here on WDIV Local 4. Join us Wednesday, October 25th at 8 p.m. when incumbent Mayor Mike Duggan and State Senator Coleman Young II tackle the topics most important to Detroiters. I will be a panelist for the debate, and Devin Skillion will moderate. There are a lot of issues facing the city, so I hope you'll be watching on October 25th. In the meantime, Devin will be back with you next week. Thank you for joining me for Flashpoint. Meet the Press is next, right after Mitch Albom's Heart of Detroit. Have a great Sunday.